The horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk should have brought the people of the United States together. Instead, it tore them apart. Conservatives quickly realized that far too many of their countrymen on the left were enthusiastically celebrating the murder, and even those who managed a weak denunciation of the act heavily implied that Kirk ultimately got what he deserved. For a moment, the realization that the average leftist was okay with the murder of Republicans galvanized the right wing as conservatives unified to praise Kirk and call for justice. Unfortunately, that unity quickly dissipated as it became clear that a battle for the Turning Point USA founders' legacy was underway. This is the worst possible outcome, not just because it turns Kirk's legacy into a political football, but because it's destroying the movement he worked so tirelessly to build. In his farewell address, our first American president, George Washington, spent a surprising amount of time outlining his vision for how the fledgling country should navigate foreign policy. Washington reminded his fellow Americans what a blessing the Lord had gifted the United States by separating the country from the great powers of Europe. Washington warned that foreign influence was a deadly factor that could infect sovereign republics, and being separated from the intrigues of the old world ensured American independence. George Washington told the crowd that the United States should engage only in economic relationships or brief, targeted alliances with clear objectives and endpoints. He warned against making any other nation an object of hatred, as it would drive the United States to make decisions that harmed its own people just to spite the hated nation. Washington also stood firmly against treating any foreign power as a favored nation, because it would conflate the interests of the favored nation with the interests of the American people. The first president foresaw a future where two sides formed inside the nation based entirely on their support or rejection of a foreign power, ensuring that foreign influence would come to dominate domestic politics. He also warned that any patriot who voiced their concern about foreign influence would be decried as a traitor for questioning our greatest ally. Washington's prediction has come to pass, but the fracture doesn't just run between left and right. It also cleaves through conservatism itself. The United States has had a close relationship with Israel for decades, sharing intelligence, providing financial aid, supplying military equipment, and offering diplomatic support. Many conservatives, particularly evangelical Christians, have what can be described in the most literal terms as a religious devotion to the modern nation-state of Israel. Others claim a more practical benefit of intelligence and military assistance in critical Middle East operations. This relationship is clearly in violation of Washington's advice, but to be fair, the same is true of our relationships with countries like the United Kingdom and Germany. The big difference seems to be the religious aspect that is attached to Israel. We may be longtime allies with the UK or Germany, but you can easily denounce them with little to no consequence. Any questioning of the relationship with Israel, however, will generate a plethora of slurs that you usually only hear from the left. Racist, Nazi, anti-Semite, bigot, you know the drill. Just as Washington predicted, the centering of one nation in our foreign policy has brought about significant internal strife and invited more foreign influence. Many pro-Israel conservatives have correctly noted the increase of investment from Qatar into the United States. While there's some irony in becoming apoplectic about one form of foreign influence while openly courting another, the concerns are at least legitimate. Both Israel and Qatar have become major outposts of American power in the Middle East, and they're spending massive amounts of money and effort increasing their influence in the United States. And that doesn't even begin to address other instances of this, like the Indian diaspora, which is attempting to solidify itself as a power bloc inside the US. This is why Washington warned us about empire and extended alliances. All of this was predictable, all of it was foreseen and warned against, but both sides bicker on as they refuse to heed the wise advice of our first president. Charlie Kirk had many great skills, and one of them was his role as a peacemaker. He was able to bring all corners of the right together and unite them in his support of Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. That's why the Civil War being fought over his legacy is so ugly. Conspiracy theories over Kirk's death abound, denunciations of people he clearly loved are called for in his name, and personal text messages between the dead father and different conservative influencers are now regularly divulged and used as weapons against the other side. It really is one of the more inhuman displays we've seen in a very long time. In a strange way, the impulse to interpret Kirk's personal messages as some form of sacred text, which justifies your version of conservatism, reminds me of the way people now look at the Constitution. The left strips our founding document of all literal meaning in the hopes of remaking the country, and the right strips it of all context to form an ideology. Both sides are more worried about the Constitution justifying their political program than they are in understanding its real meaning and intention. In truth, it's clear that Charlie Kirk held a great deal of affection and support for the state of Israel. He clearly supported its existence and believed that it held biblical significance. That said, Kirk really was America first and seemed concerned about the military intervention that the U.S. relationship with Israel often entailed. He also expressed frustration about the fact that his Zionist donors applied a great deal of pressure on TPUSA to cancel conservatives that they didn't agree with. Despite these misgivings, Kirk regularly stated that he was worried about the growing animosity towards Israel on the right and sought ways to diffuse it, both by counter-messaging domestically and curbing Israeli excesses abroad. Charlie's position was nuanced, like most of our opinions are on the issue once we're allowed to talk instead of screaming at each other. Now, instead of using the political momentum from Kirk's assassination to crush the left-wing terror network responsible for his death, the conservative movement has decided to draw its long knives and turn on each other. Both sides failed to heed Washington's advice, one hating Israel with enough fury to harm their own nation, and the other declaring that any deviation from total support of our greatest ally is tantamount to treason. At a moment where conservatives should be banding together for their very survival, they would rather settle scores than defend the future of their own nation. The reality is obvious for anyone to see. Israel is not going anywhere, at least in the short term, and the conservative movement will need a coherent plan for addressing relations with the nation. The religious commitment will continue among evangelicals at some level, but this is a generational phenomenon that is quickly fading among younger Christians. Advocates for Israel will need to make their case on a far more practical basis if they want to win over the younger conservative cohort. Those that wish to rethink or even completely abandon our relationship with Israel will also continue to exist, and their number is frankly likely to grow. If fans of Israel want to avoid the radicalization they claim to fear, there needs to be space inside the movement to voice those reasonable opinions without experiencing a leftist struggle session. Those that oppose the current relationship with Israel would do well to keep their arguments practical and factual. Washington's warning about self-sabotage due to hatred is just as serious as his warning about favored nations. A sizable portion of the left wants you and your children dead. That's a horrible thing to realize about your fellow countrymen, but we all saw it after Charlie Kirk's assassination, and you just can't unsee it. Whether a conservative is a Zionist or an Israel skeptic, they're not calling for you to be shot. They're not hoping for a bullet to find the heart of your children. That might sound like a low bar for coalition building, but it is the situation we're in. And you shouldn't ignore that fact because someone was mean to you on the internet. We don't have time to fight each other, and that's exactly the opposite of what Charlie Kirk would have wanted done in his name. Now, to be clear, I'm not playing the part of the enlightened centrist here, too good to have an opinion. I have opinions on this issue and have not been shy about sharing them, but the left must be defeated thoroughly. We don't have time for these squabbles. The conservative civil war must end. The stakes are simply too high. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time to do so. If you'd like to get these broadcasts as podcasts, make sure to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform, and when you do, leave a rating or review. It really helps with the algorithm magic. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter or Gab or Substack, if you'd like to watch these videos on Odyssey or Rumble, the links to do all of that are down below in the description. And of course, you can watch all of my videos and read all of my columns over at The Blaze. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll talk to you next time.